Hi, welcome to my Victober TBR. Can you believe that it's time for the Victober TBR? This year has gone so fast and so slow all at the same time, but I'm glad we've reached to this point because Victober is one of my favorite times of the year. For those of you who are unaware, Victober is Victorian October. It's a time when the booktube community comes together to read literature written during the epically long Victorian period. This is led by a slew of hosts, but it is the brainchild of Katie at Books and Things. This year it is co-hosted by Katie at Books and Things, Kate Howe at Kate Howe. She's not posting a lot of videos right now, but she does have a announcement video, and Marissa at Blatantly Bookish and Roz at Scallydandling about the books. So if you want to know more about this and the prompts, they each have a video, they each contribute a prompt, and they each focus their video on, or their announcement video on, recommendations for their prompt. Without further ado, let's just dive into this. There are a couple of group challenges. I do have the group read book, and I do plan on rereading it. I read it a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, if that's a couple times two, a couple to the power of 2 years ago. It is Mary Elizabeth Braden's The Doctor's Wife. I do have a copy of it, but I'm going to put a picture here because I didn't grab it and it's not on my stack and I'm not going to go hunting for it right now. But this is a really fun book. They keep all of the hosts mention that it's supposed to be like Mary Elizabeth Braden's response to Madame Bovary. Please don't think that it's like Madame Bovary. It is and it isn't. It's hilarious and wonderful. It does have spoilers for Charles Dickens's Dombey and Sons, so if you haven't read that yet and you plan on reading it, maybe don't take part in the group read this year. But if you don't mind, it's a really fun book. It's really, really fun. It's laugh out loud funny and also kind of sobering at the same time, but you're not going to feel like you're reading Madame Bovary, trust me. The other thing I want to mention before I dive into like what I'm reading for each host's prompt is the fact that they have a group prompt that is, or an extra prompt that is in honor of 2 booktubers who passed away this year. We are encouraged to read something by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and we are encouraged to read something by Wilkie Collins this year, and I will be doing both. I will be listening to an audio version of The Hound of the Baskervilles, which I'll put here. I've actually never read anything by Arthur Conan Doyle. I have a feeling I wouldn't get on with him. I'm not a super huge Sherlock Holmes fan, but I am familiar with the stories. Familiar with so many of the stories. No, I've never watched the BBC dramatization of Sherlock Holmes. What's it called? Holmes? No, Sherlock. It's called Sherlock. Never watched it. I did watch Young Sherlock as a kid a lot. I loved that movie. I really have never read anything by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I read a lot about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He's a fascinating figure from history from that period. His belief system was super interesting. I've never read The Hound of the Baskervilles. So I'm going to listen to it, and I'm not sure which edition I've decided to listen to. We'll see. It's a dramatization, and I'm going to enjoy myself and just give that a go. Who knows? Maybe it will unlock a love of Sherlock Holmes. And then for the Wilkie Collins prompt, I am going to read Man and Wife. I'm very, very excited about this. Now, Wilkie Collins and I have a love-hate relationship. Some of his books I absolutely love, and others I really don't enjoy at all. I think we have like a 50-50 read it and loved it, read it and DNF'd it rate. I will DNF Wilkie Collins faster than you can say Wilkie Collins. So we will see how this goes, but everybody speaks so highly of this, and actually I'm really interested in the subject matter. So let's find out what this is about. It starts with a quote from Wilkie Collins. It says, "This time the fiction is founded upon facts," stated Wilkie Collins in his preface to Man and Wife in 1870. Many Victorian writers responded to contemporary debates on the rights and the legal status of women, and here Collins questions the deeply inequitable marriage laws of his day. I'm not going to read everything, but I'm going to read just a little bit more. It says, man and wife examines the plight of a woman who, promised marriage by one man, comes to believe that she may inadvertently have gone through a form of marriage with his friend as recognized by the archaic laws of Scotland and Ireland. So, deals with maybe entrapment, bigamy, women's rights, women's voice, ownership of women. Yeah, this is going to be fascinating. The Mayor of Casterbridge has components about marriage as well. How the man who becomes the Mayor of Casterbridge sells his wife because he's just kind of tired of having her around and her bugging him so much, and whether or not she sees herself as free at that point, free to marry someone else, or if she still sees herself as married. I've read several nonfiction books about women who struggled in really awful marriages and had a very hard time finding freedom, finding footing, finding support in the systems that existed at this time. So super interested in this. I've read a lot about what Mary Shelley had to say about this kind of situation, and she had a lot to say. Very, very excited to be reading this. Also, this was serialized, and that is one of the prompts. That's Marissa's prompt, so it actually could count for that as well. But I have a whole slew of things for that. So we will read on. That is a big priority. There's a lot of books on this list, but that's a big priority, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Then I have some books that don't fit anywhere, but I want to read them, so I will. One is the Oxford Book of Victorian Ghost Stories. This has ghost stories from authors like Elizabeth Gaskell, Dinah Mullock, Charles Dickens, Henry James, George MacDonald, Mary Elizabeth Braddon, Wilkie Collins, Charlotte Riddle, Arthur Conan Doyle, R.L. Stevenson, Kipling, E. Nesbit, Jerome K. Jerome, M.R. James. It does not stay in the Victorian period. It has 30 stories included that happen during the actual Victorian period, and then there are 5 that happen in the 10 years that follow. Because there are 30, I'm gonna read one a day with a skip day or a extended over 2 days piece of wiggle room, but I'm gonna read one Victorian ghost story a day for the whole month of October. Very, very excited about this. That's just a little bit of extra that I'm doing. I also found, this is Victorian Diaries, the daily lives of Victorian men and women. And while it is edited, it really is just diary entries from people at that time. And there's an interesting array of the types of individuals that are included. So you get to read from a headmaster, a chief engraver, a mother, an actor, a stonemason, an archaeologist, a young lady, parents, Peter King and nurses, a curate, and a schoolboy. So I will be reading through these. I don't know if I'll read everything in here, but I'm going to dip in and out of this throughout the month and read the words of Victorians. Very excited about that. And then I have this, which is, I bought a secondhand copy and it is a little bit worse for the wear, but the inside is spotless. So I've got The Adventures of Alice Lascelles by Alexandrina Victoria, aged 10 3/4. So this is a story written and illustrated by Queen Victoria when she was 10 years old. And it stars and features her paper dolls. So at certain points in the illustration, she's actually just inserted her paper dolls and drawn around them. So you can see the paper doll faces, but the rest of it is drawn by her. And this is a story that she wrote herself. So I'm gonna read this. It doesn't really fit any of the prompts, but I'm excited to have that and to read that. Then this is memories of life in the Victorian period, but was not written in the Victorian period. So it's Victorian adjacent, but I still want to read it. This is Geoffrey Robinson's Headingham Harvest, Victorian Family Life in Rural England. I've read little snippets of this and I'm very interested in reading it. It is, again, not written down, not recorded in the actual Victorian period, but it is memories of people who lived in the Victorian period, recorded by somebody who knows those individuals. And so it's third hand account, but I am still very much interested in reading this particular Victober. Now, let's dive into the actual prompts. So, oh wait, sorry, there's one more thing. I have this very short audiobook. It is a short story called A Chapter in the History of the Tyrone Family by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. Just a short story, but I'm very excited to listen to it during October. I actually have no idea what it's about, so I'm just going to go into it blind. J. Sheridan Le Fanu has been such a success the last few years with me. I really, really enjoy everything that I have read by him, except for Green Tea. Green Tea, the short story, is just really weird to me, but the rest of them are weird in a good way. I really, really love them. So I'm going to go into A Chapter in the History of the Tyrone Family completely without any knowledge of what it is about and just enjoy the ride. Again, it's very short. So let's go to Kate Howe's prompt. Kate Howe's prompt is to read a book that has a religious component. So there's a lot of the books on my list that do have a religious component, but the one that I'm earmarking for this particular prompt is Lilith by George MacDonald. Now this is a fantasy. I've read a lot of George MacDonald in Victober times. Last year I read a coming of age romance. The year before that, I read a collection of his short stories. My very first Victober, I reread Princess and the Goblin, which is a children's fantasy. And this year, I'm going to read Lilith. I've never read Lilith before. He also has another fantasy published by the same publishing company in the same style called Fantastes, which maybe I'll read next year, but I went with Lilith this year. This is about Mr. Vane, V-A-N-E, Mr. Vane, an orphan and heir to a large house in which he has a vision that leads him through an old mirror into another world and face to face with the ultimate mystery of evil. I am as excited about reading the actual fantasy by George MacDonald as I am about reading the introduction by C.S. Lewis. Very excited about this. I don't know much about it beyond that, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love it. I love George MacDonald. That was written in 1895? Yes, 1895. All right. Then Katie. I have 4 options for Katie. Her prompt this year is to read a book that plays with form. So I have 4 things, one of which I am going to listen to on audio. I happen to have the audio for this. This is the only book by this author that was written during the Victorian period, but I have read other things by this author that I've absolutely loved. My favorite by this author, who is Elizabeth von Arman, is Vera. I know that's not most people's favorite, but it is my favorite. And you may know her because of Enchanted April, which is her most popular book. This one, however, is Elizabeth and Her German Garden. I don't have a physical copy of this, but I am going to listen to this, and I do believe that it is meant to be partly or loosely autobiographical. I think she married an older gentleman, an older German man, resented him a little bit, I think, and she writes about her life in this German garden and the changing of the seasons. It is fictional, but I think it is loosely factual. I'm going to listen to it. She has a lovely, lovely way of writing and a shocking way of writing at the same time. I don't know much more about it than what I've just said, but I'm excited to go into it. It's been on my radar for a long time, and this seems like the perfect time to do it. The reason that I know that any of these, except for one, play with form is because they were in Katie's announcement video. She recommended these as possibilities, and I picked the ones that I was already interested in. This one I knew played with form. This is a favorite of all time for me. If you want to know like deep thoughts before this reread, you can go back and watch a video I posted this summer titled Jane Austen at Home, the Jane Austen at Home tag, in which I talk for a really long time about Wuthering Heights. I'm going to do a reread of Wuthering Heights. This year I have reread Jane Eyre, and every month I am forcing myself to not reread it again. I really want to reread it again. I maybe will in December, I don't know. But I am gonna reread Wuthering Heights because I have reread this year Jane Eyre and I have reread Agnes Grey this year, and so I thought it only fair that I pick up Emily. I did think about reading her poems this year instead. There are still a handful of her poems that I haven't ever read, or maybe even her juvenilia. I thought of picking up something that was placed in Gondel, but in the end I was like, no, you know what? I really have a hankering just to reread Wuthering Heights. I do reread Wuthering Heights from time to time. I think the last time was a couple of years ago. I have just purchased this brand new Penguin Classics edition of it so that I could have a clean slate for another round of annotation. Really looking forward to that, except that I realized that the brand new copy of Penguin is different. The spines are different from all the old Penguin classics. Why, Penguin? Why? But that's okay. It'll just look weird on my shelf, and you know what? Wuthering Heights is weird, so it tracks. This is the story of Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, the boy that their father brings home from a trip that he takes. How that kind of undoes the entire family for generations, and how the ghost of Cathy haunts Heathcliff. I mean, in a nutshell. In the video that I posted in the summer where I talk about this extensively, I argue that it is a love story, that is the love story. I know a lot of people have to read this as a revenge story in order to make it work for them, but I will talk, after I reread it this time, I will talk a lot about why I believe this is just such a beautiful love story. It's not a love story that you want to emulate, but it is a love story. So we'll talk about that. And it plays with form because it's like stories within stories. You know, it starts with Mr. Lockwood arriving, and it's the story of Mr. Lockwood and his stay with his little cold and being talked to by Nellie. But it is also the story of Heathcliff and Cathy as children. It's the story of Heathcliff and Cathy as adults. It's the story of Heathcliff and Cathy's children. It is told through a very interesting and sometimes difficult to wrap your mind around set of forms. The next thing I was so excited to see, because it was a book I was going to read. It was a book I was going to read anyway. This is something that I picked up for my birthday book haul back in 2023. With my eyes set on reading it in October. I've already mentioned what a great time I have had with this author in Victober's past, and so I'm really excited to be reading Wilder's Hand by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And I was even more excited when I saw Katie say, hey, this book plays with form. I guess it plays with form, according to Katie, in the way that the author is omniscient and can talk about, or the narrator is omniscient and can talk about situations that they were not present for and has that knowledge and that information. And she said it was kind of weird, but also that in a J. Sheridan Le Fanu it kind of works. So I'm excited to read another J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I only know what's on the back here, so I'll read that. I don't think it's too spoilery, but I haven't read this, so I don't really know. It says, the Wilders and the Brandons share a history of intermarriage, bitter rivalry, villainy, and madness. The wedding of Mark Wilder to his rich and beautiful cousin, Dorcas Brandon, was to inaugurate a harmonious new era at Brandon Hall. But as the ceremony draws near, Mark disappears without trace, leaving Dorcas in shock and the assembled family in a state of severe agitation. And when Mark's letters arrive back at the hall, postmarked from Europe, the sinister figure of Captain Stanley Lake emerges from the wings to claim Dorcas as his own. Originally published in 1864. So, I didn't tell you when Wuthering Heights was originally published. Wuthering Heights was originally published in 1847. So we have an 1895, an 1847, and an 1864. I should probably tell you when Man and Wife was published as well. Man and Wife was published in 1870. Okay. So we've got Wilder's Hand. I'm really excited about this. I just trust J. Sheridan Le Fanu to tell such an engaging story. Yes, he wrote in the 1800s, but he feels so fresh as you read him. I have never been like trapped by his writing. Sometimes with Wilkie Collins or another author that I haven't talked about yet, but who's on my stack, sometimes I get trapped in their writing. Like I can't find my way out of their long sentences and their excessive paragraphs. I never feel that way with J. Sheridan Le Fanu. So very, very intrigued and excited to read that one. And then I'm going to read all of these. This is Elizabeth Gaskell's Gothic Tales. There are 9 short stories / novellas in here, and I want to read them all over the course of the month. I don't know if I will, and one of them, Lois the Witch, will be a reread, but one of these stories was mentioned as playing with form. Trying to find, there we go, the table of contents. One of these stories was mentioned as playing with form. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was The Grey Woman or The Poor Clare. I don't remember which one it was, but it doesn't matter because I have already decided that I want to read them all. Gothic Tales, it's October. If you can't tell, I've got kind of a spooky vibe going on with the ghost stories, with Lilith, with J. Sheridan Le Fanu at all, with the Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. I've got kind of a creepy thing going on because it's October and I love to read creepy things in October. The Victorians did creepy very, very well. So I'm planning on reading all 9 of these Gothic Tales. Now there is one that overlaps and is also in my Victorian bind up of ghost stories. So I'll only read it once. I'm not going to read it twice in 1 month. I don't think. Maybe I'll love it. Maybe I will. But one of these, I think The Grey Woman plays with form. So I'll have to go back and rewatch Katie's video to see if that's true. However, I'm just going to read all of them. Let's see what it says on the back. It says, such whispered tales, such old temptations and hauntings and devilish terrors. Elizabeth Gaskell's chilling Gothic tales blend the real and the supernatural to eerie, compelling effect. Disappearances inspired by local legends of mysterious vanishings mixes gossip and fact. Lois the Witch, a novella based on an account of the Salem witch hunts, shows how sexual desire and jealousy lead to hysteria, while in The Old Nurse's Story, a mysterious child roams the freezing Northumberland moors. Whether darkly surreal, such as The Poor Clare, where an evil doppelganger is formed by a woman's bitter curse, or mischievous like Curious if True, a playful reworking of fairy tales, all the pieces in this volume form a stark contrast to the social realism of Gaskell's novels, revealing a darker and more unsettling style of writing. And also maybe what the Brontes and her had in common. Like, what did they talk about? This. I imagine anyway. Okay. Moving on to Roz. I am going to listen to a performance, I guess, of Charlie's Aunt. I'm not going to purchase this and read along. I'm just going to listen to it. There is an audio of the whole play on Audible, and I am going to, I believe I have to purchase it, but I'm going to go ahead and use a credit and do that and listen to Charlie's Aunt by Brandon Thomas. I don't know what this is about at all, but I hear it's pretty funny. So that'll be nice. And then I'm also going to watch the movie of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. I have watched this before, 2006 or 2005, somewhere around there, but I had just returned from living overseas and I don't remember. I remember watching it, but I don't remember what it's about. I think it's supposed to be quite funny. Most of Oscar Wilde's stuff is enjoyable to me. So I'm going to watch this movie. I think it has Rupert Everett in it. I could be wrong about that. I'm going to watch this movie version of The Importance of Being Earnest. Then for Marissa, serialized. A lot of the things that I've already shared with you were serialized, but I've got 3 that I'm going to read that are specific. No, sorry, 4 that I'm going to read that are specific for this. The first one I'm going to listen to, I don't have a physical copy of this, but I'm going to listen to an audio version of Catriona, also known as David Balfour, by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is the sequel to Kidnapped. I read Kidnapped last year, and it ends almost mid-sentence. It ends with no resolution whatsoever. And at first I was very upset by this. And then I realized, oh, there is actually a sequel. And oh, most books nowadays publish both of them together at the same time, like Little Women, right? Most people today don't realize that Little Women is actually 2 books published together. Most people don't realize nowadays that Kidnapped is actually 2 books published together. The edition that I had of Kidnapped only had Kidnapped and did not have Catriona. I have to read Catriona, but I've waited a whole year. I did not purchase a copy of it, but I am going to listen to it, and I'm very relieved. Very relieved. I have a second Robert Louis Stevenson that I will read because I so enjoyed adventure novels last year. I didn't intend to do 2 Robert Louis Stevensons, but this one just really, it seems to deal with some of the things that I really loved about Kidnapped and maybe develop them a little bit more. And so I'm going to give it a try. This is The Master of Balantree by Robert Louis Stevenson. And it says, the Master of Balantree opens in the old Scottish house of Durrisdeer, ancestral home of the Durries, a family divided by the Jacobite Rising of 1745. Its adventure draws in sea voyages, piracy, buried treasure, magic, and nightmare, and centers on the fatal rivalry between 2 brothers, James and Henry. This was a key component in Kidnapped. And the wealthy and beautiful kinswoman who loves one brother but marries the other. Oh. Okay, the family servant, McKellar, narrates The Master of Balantree, and his divided loyalties dramatize the question of mastery, which in his introduction to this blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I really liked all of Kidnapped, but I loved the part that was establishing the story that took place in the actual family castle with the weird uncle who won't explain who he is or why things are the way they are, who sells the guy who sells David. And so I want more of that, and I think The Master of Balantree may give it to me. It is also sometimes called A Winter's Tale, so I know that it's going to have the vibes that I want. It's got kind of the spooky factor, it's got the adventure factor, and it's got the wintry fall sort of setting factor. It takes place in Scotland, and I'm just super excited about it. It doesn't say when it was first published, but it says that he started writing it in December of 1887. So we'll say it's around there sometime. This was serialized. That's why I'm talking about it right now. And so I believe that the first set of chapters probably would have come out in January of 1888. So excited to read that. And then I am going to read this one. This is my favorite story by Thomas Hardy because I love the movie so much, but I've actually never read the book, and it's got some witchy vibes. So I'm going to read The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. Now, Thomas Hardy and I have, much like Wilkie Collins and I, a love-hate relationship. There are certain Thomas Hardy books I will not touch with a 10-foot pole. But there is a movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones that was made for TV back in the 1990s that I have always loved. Always loved. And I am also a big fan of Thomas Hardy's writing, but not always his stories or his messages. And so I am going to throw caution to the wind because I read The Mayor of Casterbridge and absolutely loved it for the group read a couple of years ago. But at that time, I had sworn off ever reading Hardy again because of just really bad experiences with Hardy books. I'm going to give it a go because I know this is a story that I love, but I don't know if I love the Thomas Hardy version or just the made-for-TV version. So again, I really do like his writing. I really like his writing, but his stories don't always fly for me. So we'll see. I'm going to give it a try. This is about Eustacia Vi, And it says, she crisscrosses the wild Egdon Heath, eager to experience life to the full in her quest for music, poetry, passion, and war. She marries Clem Yeobright, native of the Heath, but his idealism frustrates her romantic ambitions, and her discontent draws others into a tangled web of deceit and unhappiness. If I remember correctly, maybe it's not in the book, I don't know, but in the movie there was some talk about her being a witch. So I will see if that's in there. I do think it has witchy vibes. I do, but maybe not the actual book, maybe just the movie. Excited to find out either way. And then this one. I don't know what Victober does to me. I don't know what it does to me, but I want to read another book by a man I previously, before last Victober, thought that I just really, really did not get on with. In my understanding of the world, there are two kinds of people. There are Dickens people and there are Trollope people. And it is a rare breed, like Katie at Books and Things, who loves them both. But I so loved Orly Farm last year and still think about it so much. I still think about it so much that I am going to take a leap, and I'm actually not even going to read a standalone by Anthony Trollope. I'm going to read the first book in the Palliser series. This may be a mistake, but I'm doing it and I'm happy about it. I'm going to tuck in the dark October nights into Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? Can You Forgive Her? What really worked for me with Orly Farm was planning out like how much I needed to read and then going to bed early, like each night to get through it in the month, and then going to bed, getting in bed early, just curling up with an audiobook version and the book and committing to reading that every night before I went to sleep in October. And I loved Orly Farm. I read all but the last book in the Barchester Chronicles. I haven't read the last book yet. I own it. I did not like the Barchester Chronicles at all. And I was part of a read-along one year and trying to get into it. And I was all on board with The Warden until the end of The Warden. The Warden and Barchester Towers should really be published as one entity, I think. But I didn't trust him after that. I didn't trust him at all as a storyteller after that, after finishing The Warden. But I continued on. And there are situations and storylines and interactions that are just sparkling in that series, that are just so sparkling. I think The Little House at Allington is my favorite of all of them, but I can't say that I like it. And I thought that I was done. Like, I would like to go and read the last book in the series, but I just can't make myself pick it up because I just didn't really enjoy 95% of my time in Barchester. For whatever reason, I was really drawn to read Orly Farm last year, which is a standalone, and so wonderful. So wonderful. I think about it all the time now, and I want that feeling again. I don't know if I have to read standalones by him, or if I have to read country stories by him, like country house stories by him. I don't know. I don't know what the secret sauce was, but I'm going to give this a try. And I'm hopeful that I'm going to really enjoy this so that I have a series by him that I can really dig into, because I would love to be able to dig into another Victorian series. So let's find out. It says on the back, and by the way, I read the synopsis for like 12 of his books. There were a couple of standalones that I almost picked, but I decided in the end that I'm gonna give this a try. This storyline does call to me, so we'll see. It says Alice Vavaser, and I will probably say all these last names wrong, Vavaser, cannot decide whether to marry her ambitious but violent cousin George or the upright and gentlemanly John Grey, and finds herself accepting and rejecting each of them in turn. Increasingly confused about her own feelings and unable to forgive herself for such vacillation, her situation is contrasted with that of her friend Lady Glencora, who is forced to marry the rising politician Plantagenet Palliser in order to prevent the worthless Burgo Fitzgerald from wasting her vast fortune. In asking his readers to pardon Alice for her transgression of the Victorian moral code, Trollope created a telling and wide-ranging account of the social world of his day. Can You Forgive Her is the first novel in the Palliser series. Okay, very intrigued by this storyline. Very hopeful that I'm going to love this. Very confident that last year I found a system of reading Trollope that really works for me. We'll see. We'll see if this is a winner. I'm going in super hopeful. That is what I'm going to read for Victober. I am really looking forward to this stack of books. At this point, if you are only here for Victober content, you can go. But if you would like to see the other books that I'm going to try and pepper in throughout October, because I also want some other kinds of vibes, stick around because I have a small stack of supplemental reading to do during the month of October. The bulk of my reading will be what you just saw, the Victober stuff. And yeah, you're right. You are right as you sit there and say, she's never going to read all that. You're right. I'm probably not going to read all of that. But those are the things that I would like to read. Those are the things I'm hopeful to read. And actually in the month of October, I pretty solidly get through my Victober TBR. So it's this next set of books that I may not read, but I'd really like to. I have no real intention of being able to finish this book in October, but I would like to start it perhaps. And that is Dunton Wood. I've been seeing so many people talk about this that when I had the opportunity to grab a used copy, I went for it. I don't generally read books that star animals, but I think these particular animals are so humanized that it's not going to bother me at all. And it sounds and looks so fall-ish. I imagine that I might read this over the course of October, November, and maybe even December with the speed that I've been reading things. So I am gonna give this a try. Dunton Wood. This is, it says on the back, enter the magical, colorful, poignant world of Bracken and Rebecca, Mandrake the Tyrant, Boswell the Scribe, Holver, Comfrey, and all the other moles of Dunton Wood. Set deep in the English countryside, this enchanting story tells of an ancient community losing its soul, but saved by courage and love. It just sounds lovely. I do have an audiobook for this, and I think that, you know, on a Sunday morning, making breakfast, chilling, doing fall things, walking the dog, this might be the perfect companion. So, on audio. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a read. This is a young adult or a middle grade series that I have wanted to read my entire life and never have. So when I had a chance to pick up the first book in that series, I took it. And it seems like perfect fall vibes. This is Susan Cooper's Dark is Rising Quartet, I believe. This is the first book, Over Sea and Under Stone. And I remember when I was in high school, I used to frequent a used bookstore that you could like bring books and they would give you credit and then you could use that credit to take home other used books. And I remember bringing home the third book. I didn't realize it was the third book in the series, but I brought home the third book, which I think is called The Green Witch, because the cover was so compelling to me. And then I realized it was third in a series, so I never read it, took it back and exchanged it. But that has always stuck with me. And so now, as an adult, many decades later, maybe not many decades later, I have finally gotten around to reading the first in the series. So it says, all through time, the two great forces of light and dark have battled for control of the world. Now, after centuries of balance, the dark is summoning its terrifying forces to rise once more, and three children find themselves caught in the conflict. Simon, Jane, and Barney are on holiday in Cornwall, and they discover an ancient map that leads to a grail, a vital weapon for the light's fight against evil. The search for the grail becomes their quest, and they risk their lives in a race against sinister human beings who serve the dreadful power of the dark. So that just sounds super fun. That sounds super fun, and I think it'll be a very fast read and like a palate cleansing read. I could read it in between one Victorian novel and the next. And I'm excited about that. I've also wanted to really start this series for a while. That is Deanna Raybourne's, I can't talk. That is Deanna Raybourne's The Veronica Speedwell mystery series. This is A Curious Beginning. It says, London, 1887. After burying her spinster aunt, orphaned Veronica Speedwell is free to resume her world travels in pursuit of scientific inquiry and the occasional romantic dalliance. As familiar with hunting butterflies as with fending off admirers, Veronica intends to embark upon the journey of a lifetime. But fate has other plans, and Veronica thwarts her own attempted abduction with the help of an enigmatic German baron who offers her sanctuary in the care of his friend Stoker, a reclusive and bad-tempered natural historian. But before the baron can reveal what he knows of the plot against her, he is found murdered, leaving Veronica and Stoker on the run from an elusive assailant as wary partners in search of the villainous truth. And I hear that this relationship between Stoker and Veronica is very slow burn across all of the novels, and I think that this could be a series that I really love. I read Killers of a Certain Age, is that what it's called? Deanna Raybourne's book about retired assassins who are all like elderly women now. Elderly, they're like in their 50s and 60s, and really, really liked her writing. So I'm hoping that I will love this as well. Then I want to reread this series because I never got past the first book. So I guess I'm not rereading the series. I want to reread this first book so that I can finish reading the series. Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I don't know why I didn't pick it up. I really enjoyed this book, but I read it maybe back in like 2016 or 2017, so it needs a reread. And so this says, Ellingham Academy is a famous private school in Vermont founded by an early 20th century tycoon for the best and brightest students around. When Ellingham's wife and daughter were kidnapped, the only clue was a mocking riddle listing methods of murder signed with the frightening pseudonym Truly Devious. Their disappearance became one of the most unsolved crimes in history. Many years later, true crime aficionado Stevie Bell is set to begin her first year at the academy, and she is determined to solve this cold case. That is, she will solve it when she gets a grip on her demanding new school life and her housemates, the inventor, the novelist, the actor, the artist, and the jokester. But Truly Devious makes a surprise return. The past has crawled out of its grave and someone has gotten away with murder. Now, I do remember quite a lot about this, but I don't know what I don't remember. So I want to reread this so that I can continue on with the rest of the series. And October, November feels like a really good time to do that. This is the second book in a series. I read the first book, No Life for a Lady by Hannah Dolby, as an ARC. Picked up a copy because I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. And then this year, I pre-ordered the second book in that series. This is not an easy series to get a hold of in the States. In fact, the second book seems to be printed in the States, but the first book I had to get from Blackwell's. So I don't know what's going on with that. But Hannah Dolby's first book in this series is called No Life for a Lady, and it is a joy. It is an absolute joy. It's about a woman in the early 1900s, late 1800s, who is looking for her mother who has been missing. And she has to become like an investigator. And it's really fun. It's really fun, and it's shocking ending, super fun, but it's also a little romance going on. A really great story. So I pre-ordered the second one, which came to me with no problem in the United States. But again, like I said, I had to get the first one from Blackwell's. The ARC came to me from the United States. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, why it's so hard to get a hold of this book, but I highly suggest you give it a try if you want to read a good mystery. So the second book says, she is a lady detective who spends her time solving mysteries and unveiling scandals in the bustling seaside town of Hastings and St. Leonard's, a popular spot for the Victorian middle classes. But when the body of a local woman is found on the beach, Violet's efforts to investigate are blocked at every turn. Is that because as a woman she can't possibly be allowed to think or act for herself? Or is it because someone sinister has Violet in their sights? That's a terrible description. But I know how much I enjoyed the first book, and I'm pretty certain I will enjoy the second book as well. So this is How to Solve Murders Like a Lady. Again, there's a romance component, but there's a lot of humor and a lot of joy and a lot of suspense and shocking things that happen in the first book. So I anticipate that the second book will be just as great. Then I have two books for kind of the creepy vibes. One is A Good House for Children. This one just sounds so creepy. This is by Kate Collins. And it says, once upon a time, Orla was a woman, a painter, a lover. Now she is a mother and a wife. And when her husband Nick suggests that their city apartment has grown too small for their lives, she agrees, in part because she does agree, and in part because she is too tired to think about what she really does want. When Nick announces with pride that he has found an antiquated Georgian house on the Dorset Cliffs, a good house for children, he says with tons of space and gorgeous grounds, Orla approves. But as the family settles into the mansion, Nick, absent all week, commuting to the city for work, Orla finds herself unsettled. She hears voices when no one is around, doors open and close on their own, and her son Sam, who's not spoken in 6 months, seems to have made an imaginary friend whose motives Orla does not trust. Now, there's more there, which I'm not going to read, but it does say 4 decades earlier, there was Lydia. So I think there is dual timelines. I think there are ways that those dual timelines are going to interact with each other, but sounds super creepy and wonderful and suspenseful. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I've had this one just lying around for a while now, and I need to get to it, and October seems like the perfect time to get to it, but I don't know if I will. It's quite long. But this is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. And this is about Colette Lesage. It says, Colette is a lonely artist who heads an elite fine art school for children in upstate New York. Her youthful beauty masks the dark truth of her life. She has endured centuries of turmoil and heartache in the wake of her grandfather's long ago decision to make her immortal like himself. Now, in 1984, Colette finds her life upended by the arrival of a gifted child from a troubled home, the return of a stalking presence from her past, and her own mysteriously growing hunger for blood. Combining brilliant prose with breathtaking, maybe heartbreaking too, but with breathtaking suspense, Jacqueline Holland's The God of Endings serves as a larger exploration of the human condition in all its complexity, asking us the most fundamental question: is life in this world a gift or a curse? Sounds like the perfect time of year to read that book. We'll see if I get to it. I would really like to. I also have 3 just cozy feel-good books. Totally cozy vibes, feel-good books. One is Melissa Tagg's Autumn by the Sea. This says, it does not sound cozy, but I've heard that it is very cozy. It looks very cozy. It has autumn in the title. I think we're gonna get cozy. It says, abandoned as a toddler, Sydney Rose has spent years wondering who she really is, homesick for a life she has never lived. When a private investigator crashes into her world, she finds herself heading to a tiny seaside town in Maine to meet a woman named Maggie who was searching for the granddaughter she lost decades ago. If not for Maggie, Neil McKeon might still be back in Scotland, bereft and alone. Instead, he has a full life in Muir Harbor with an adopted family he loves and a blueberry farm to run. It's always a blueberry farm. But the farm is struggling, and strange occurrences have him concerned. Worse, Maggie's once again caught up in the past, convinced that she has finally found her long-lost granddaughter. Worried for Maggie, Neil is suspicious of the city girl who shows up at the farm, but there's something about Sydney that tugs on him, drawing out secrets he never meant to share. While Neil grapples with the future of the farm, Sydney wrestles with a past that's messier than ever. Together, they've pulled into a mystery complete with a centuries-old legend, unexpected danger, and a love as deep and wild as the sea. A little cheesy sounding, but also super comfy vibes. So, looking forward to reading this. This is the first in a trilogy. If I enjoy it, I'll get the other 2 books and read them at some point next year. This is also the first in a series, I believe a trilogy, but I could be wrong about that. This is The Broken Hearts Bakery by Carla Laureano. This one says, Sometimes the town that broke your heart is the only place that can heal you. So those coming back to country town vibes, that feels very autumn to me, very nostalgic. So when Gemma Van Buren left her hometown of Haven Ridge, Colorado, she swore she would never return, and she has kept that promise, leaving old shadows behind and building her reputation as one of LA's preeminent family law attorneys. But when her lifelong best friend begs Gemma to come stay with her teen stepdaughter while she is on a business trip, she doesn't have the heart to refuse. She'll simply keep a low profile, do her honorary aunt duties for Taylor, and be gone before anyone notices. But Haven Ridge seems to have a mind of its own, and before she knows it, Gemma finds herself caught up with new friends and old rivalries. When Taylor is targeted by teen bullies, Gemma does the only thing she knows how to do, ply her honorary niece with baked goods and words of affirmation. There's more that you can do, but that's okay. Soon, her temporary lodgings are ground zero for teenage girls seeking sugar and consolation for shockingly adult problems, which the girls soon dub the Broken Hearts Bakery. Complicating matters is an unexpected reunion with Gemma's high school sweetheart, Stephen, who is determined to change her mind about him, the town, and the nature of love itself. Because as it turns out, her niece isn't the only one nursing a broken heart. Little romance, little coming home vibes, little small town vibes. Love it all. Absolutely here for this. We'll definitely find a place and time to fit those in this fall. If not in October, I hope in October, but if not in October, November. And then finally, I have Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly by Maria Bostwick. Now, Maria Bostwick wrote a book I read last summer. No, the summer before last, which was called The Restoration of Celia Fairchild, which I just loved so much. It was one of my favorite books of the year. It was about a woman. She changes jobs, or she leaves her jobs, and she buys an old house, or she inherits her aunt's old house, and so she's fixing up this old house. She's trying to adopt this child. She's a single woman. It's just so feel good. It's so feel good. It had house restoration in it too, which I really love. I just absolutely adored this book, and it was the only book that I had ever read by this author. So when I saw this one, I picked it up, and I think it has those nostalgic fall vibes. It has those going back home again vibes. It says, Esme Cahill thinks she has failed spectacularly. Recently fired from her New York City publishing job, divorced from her husband, and possessing little more than a broken down car and a pile of unfinished manuscripts, she drives home to Asheville, North Carolina, at the request of her late grandmother Adele, who had begged Esme just before she died to return to the place she grew up. There, Esme discovers the once charming lakeside retreat run by her family is sliding towards financial ruin. So with the help of her grandfather George, estranged mother Robin, and a traveling chef, Dawes, maker of the world's best grilled cheese sandwich, they set to work. And during an exploration of the attic, Esme unearths something magical, a trove of museum-worthy art quilts sewn by Adele. Piecing together the inspiration behind the quilts, Esme discovers a forgotten chapter in her family history and her grandmother's untold story, that of a gifted artist who never received her due. This is an always emotional, sometimes humorous, very human novel of what it means to be a family, the ties that bind us together, and the unintentional hurts that can rend us apart. And along the way, Esme learns that failure can be the first step toward the life that you are meant to find. And that guarantees I will read this book in October. It just sounds so wonderful. So wonderful. It's like my kind of story. I love that kind of story. There are a few other things that I would maybe like to try to read, but I'm not sure I will. Maybe not in October. One is the third and final book in the trilogy that I'm reading by Cassandra Clare, which is Chain of Thorns. I do have a copy of it, but I'm not going to show it right now. I'm looking on my computer to see what my list is. Another book that I might want to read in the month of October, it comes out in October, but I may not read it until November, is Miranda Hart's new memoir, which is called I Haven't Been Entirely Honest with You. I love Miranda Hart. I watch anything she puts out. I read anything she puts out. She had a YouTube video for a while, YouTube channel for a while. I watched every video. Like, I love Miranda Hart. She's just so hopeful and real and funny. So I'd like to read that. And I would like to pick up the next book in the Raven Boy cycle. I'd like to be able to finish that by the end of the year and read one book a month, but maybe I won't. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And that's it. It's a lot of reading plans, but I don't have to read it all. I don't have to read it all. Those are the books that I'm going to put on my like TBR shelf that sits in front of me in the living room that I pull from. I want to read every single one of these, but there's just not enough time in the day. I am hoping that October is going to be a gentler month at work than September has been. September has been not good. I'll just say that. We're only halfway through it and it has been not good. That is all I will say about that. For those of you who have been following my healing journey after my random fall, I am feeling so much better. I do still wear a brace on my knee when I'm at work, but and sometimes my ankle, but my ankle, all the bruising and everything is gone. My knee is getting better by the day. And I think maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I think I should be back to normal. So maybe earlier. I think I would have healed a whole lot faster if I didn't have to work on it. But I do. And believe it or not, teachers are on their feet like all day long. So yeah, but I am on the mend. I am on the mend. Thank you for your concern and your sweet messages. I really appreciate that. Let's go read. That's all I got to say. Let's go read. Thanks for watching.